Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Morning decisions. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
entering a realm between the hidden and forgotten, a slipstream caught between realities, a secret museum of the esoteric, the private library of shadows, all taking place in a world forged from mystery and caught between logic and myth. You are entering Para-reality.
Good evening, seekers of the strange and the unexplained. Welcome to Para-reality, a place where shadows whisper, mysteries linger, and the line between fact and the unknown grows razor thin. I'm Sandman, your guide through the hidden corridors of reality. Here every question awakens a mystery, and every mystery pulls us deeper into the truth concealed in the shadows. Tonight, we step once again into the world where truth and mystery collide. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for being here. As I said, I'm your host, Sandman. You know, over the past 2 episodes of my summer series, we've explored 2 of the most commonly reported beings associated with the UFO phenomenon. We began with the Greys, those mysterious entities that have become the modern face of alien encounters. We've examined reports of abductions, missing time, hybridization theories, and the countless questions surrounding what these beings may be doing and why they appear so frequently in UFO lore. Then we turned our attention to the Nordics. Unlike the Greys, these visitors were often described as human-looking, compassionate, and deeply interested in humanity's future. Their stories revolved around guidance, warnings, spiritual growth, and the possibility that the UFO phenomenon might have another face entirely. But throughout both of these episodes, another question has been lingering quietly in the background. And that's a question that many experiencers, researchers, and investigators have wrestled with for decades. So if the Greys are carrying out the work and the Nordics are delivering the messages, then who exactly is behind all of this? Because hidden within some of the strangest reports in UFO history is another type of entity entirely, one that receives far less attention than the Greys and far less publicity than the Nordics. And yet, this often leaves a deeper impression on those people who claim to have encountered these beings. You see, for decades, experiencers have reported encounters with really tall beings that resemble enormous insects, often described as praying mantises. And unlike the Greys, they rarely seem concerned with having a direct interaction. And unlike the Nordics, they don't really engage in a lot of lengthy discussions about humanity's future or anything like that. So instead of doing all that, they watch, they observe. And according to a lot of accounts, they appear to possess an intelligence that's almost impossible for us mere humans to comprehend. And witnesses frequently struggle to describe the feeling that they have of just being in the presence of these beings. Some people talk about having just an overwhelming sense of like awe, and other people say that they experience intense fear. And a lot of people claim that these beings, these insectoids, just they got the feeling that these were an ancient, powerful race that was somehow aware of things that's far beyond our human level of understanding. And I think this is maybe probably the most intriguing out of all this, is that these entities often appear alongside the other beings, the Greys and the Nordics, sometimes both at the same time. And that kind of raises an unsettling question or an unsettling possibility. So if the Insectoids aren't merely just a race of, I don't know, what if they're just not merely another type of extraterrestrial, right? What if they occupy this really different role within this phenomenon, just completely altogether? What if? So tonight, I'm going to conclude my summer series by exploring one of the most bizarre, controversial, and fascinating entities in all of UFO lore, the Insectoids, also known as the Mantids, and I'll probably be using those terms interchangeably here at different times this evening. And the possibility that they may represent something far stranger than we imagine. So tonight on Parareality, we confront the intelligence behind the mystery. But before we do that, we got to take a quick commercial break, and I will be right back in about 60 seconds. So take a listen to this.
Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel, maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Parareality is a proud member of the Evergreen Podcast Network. For more information or to check out other shows on the network, please visit evergreenpodcast.com.
Broadcast from a secret bunker somewhere outside of Nashville, Tennessee. This is the award-winning podcast, Parareality.
Welcome back, everybody. You know, before we get into it, I want to say this. The Smoky Mountain Bigfoot Conference may be over, and Eric and I had a great time at the conference. And it may be over, like I said, but the stories that we heard in Gatlinburg, what we collected there, those are going to remain with us for a long time. So I want to send a thank you to everyone who stopped by to meet us, share their encounter, talk about the Parareality podcast, or explore the books and projects that have grown from more than 2 decades of me investigating the unexplained. Events like this are just a reminder that the paranormal community is built on more than evidence and theories. It's all about people. It's built all on people. People who are willing to share experiences that often have no easy explanation. And I'm really grateful to everyone who trusted Eric and I with their personal story. Some of those conversations may help inspire future investigations, and definitely are going to be featured on upcoming episodes of the podcast. So thank you also to the organizers, speakers, vendors, researchers, and of course you, the attendees, who made Gatlinburg such a memorable event. The search continues, and if you're listening to this and you're going to be anywhere near Hopkinsville, Kentucky on August the 22nd and 23rd of this year, 2026, I've got an invitation for you. You see, I'll be appearing at GoblinCon, sans Easy E this time. It'll just be me, and I'd love for you to stop by and say hello. I'll have the Parareality podcast table, booth, whatever you want to call it, all set up with you know, my podcast gear, my books, merchandise, and there's going to be plenty of opportunities for us to talk about UFOs, cryptids, ghosts, conspiracy theories, and all things strange and unexplained. And here's something else that I'd love for you guys to do if you're going to be there. I want you to bring me your story. If you've had an encounter with the unknown, a ghostly experience, a UFO sighting, a cryptid encounter, or anything else that defies explanation, I want to hear about it. I want you to come tell me your story. And it could end up being featured on a future episode of the Parareality podcast. So don't be shy. I get a lot of people at these conferences who come up to me and they're willing to tell me their story, but they don't want to go on the record and put it on the podcast. I've had so many good stories that I just can't air because the person won't do it. Don't be one of those people. If you've got a story, come up, tell it to me. You don't have to give your name. You can remain completely anonymous. You can trust me to honor that request by you. And if you want me to disguise your voice, I can do that too. I got plenty of software to do all those things. So if you're going to be there and you got a story, don't be shy. Don't be afraid to get it on the podcast. Don't be one of those people who won't go and put it on the record. Come find my booth, find my table, bring your story, tell it to me. And whether you've been listening since the early days or whether you've just discovered the show, I'd really enjoy meeting you, regardless of whether you have a story to tell or not. But I do want to hear about your experiences. I do want to get them on the podcast. And I think that talking about these mysteries that are present in this world, well, it keeps us all asking those important questions. So if you're going to attend Goblin Con, make sure you stop by the Parareality Podcast booth. Find me. I can't wait to meet you. I can't wait to hear your story. And I'll see you in Hopkinsville, Kentucky on August the 22nd and 23rd. So now that I've got all that over with, let's start off with the podcast, okay? So when most people think about aliens, a particular image immediately comes to mind. Something like a gray, those big, large almond-shaped eyes, the big oversized head with the small mouth and the thin stick body. It's an image that's so deeply ingrained in popular culture that even people with little to no interest in the UFO phenomenon will instantly recognize what this is. And over the last several decades, the Greys have dominated the conversation surrounding extraterrestrial encounters. The Nordics has also carved out their own space within UFO lore. Their stories, well, they're not as common, but they're still widely known among researchers and experiencers. They've had books written about them. They've had documentaries that they've been featured in. Entire belief systems have even emerged around the idea of these Nordics or these beings from the Pleiades. The Insectoids, though, well, they occupy a different position. And despite appearing in countless encounter reports, they're not really discussed outside of serious UFO circles. They're not featured prominently in movies. They don't appear on magazine covers. And most people, unless they're really deep in the UFO lore, have never really even heard of them at all. But yet, among those who claim to have encountered these beings, these insectoids are oftentimes described as the most memorable beings out of all of them. Now, part of that may be because they challenge our expectations. Because if someone was going to invent an advanced extraterrestrial civilization, why would they make it look like a giant insect, right? Human beings, well, we've got a complicated relationship with insects, as far as I'm concerned. We admire them, yeah, and we study them, of course, and we even, to a certain degree, depend on insects. But we also fear insects as well. How many of you out there have a fear of insects, right? And they seem alien. They look alien. Even though they're sharing our planet, they don't look like they belong here. Their movements are really weird and different. Their behavior isn't emotional. It's different than ours. Of course, their appearance is completely different than what we look like and what we're used to. They don't necessarily have the features to smile and express emotions the way that we do. And maybe that's one of the reasons why so many people out there fear insects. And that could also tie into why so many people out there find these reports of these insectoid beings really just unsettling. Because unlike the Nordics, they don't resemble these idealized human specimens, right? And unlike the Greys, they don't even resemble distorted human beings. They're just something else entirely, completely separate, completely alien. Now, the typical insectoid is described as standing somewhere between 6 and 8 feet tall. And the witnesses often compare them to praying mantises because of their elongated bodies, their triangular-shaped heads, and their big, enormous eyes. And their limbs are usually described as being angular and thin, and their movements are like deliberate and precise, and kind of like a praying mantis. And that's one of the reasons why they're often referred to as mantids. But what really stands out in a lot of the witness testimony isn't just their appearance, it's also their presence. Experiencers of insectoids, they struggle a lot to explain what they mean by their presence. They will describe it as like something, this being, or they enter the room where this insectoid is, and they immediately become aware of it, whether they see it immediately, first off or not. And some people report feeling like these beings possess this super immense intelligence. And still others say that there is this feeling of like authority that just radiates out from this being, like it has some sort of almost like pheromones. You know how humans have pheromones, and it attracts the opposite sex supposedly, and we can't see it. We can't necessarily smell it, even though it's like an olfactory type thing, but we can kind of sense it when someone has these pheromones that are kind of put out. It's kind of like that, as far as I'm concerned. And a lot of people who encounter these beings, they say that they just know somehow that this being is important, that it's an authoritarian type person or being. And that's where this mystery really begins, as far as I'm concerned, because unlike the Greys or the Nordics, the Insectoids don't really seem interested in introducing themselves and sitting down and having a conversation. They don't explain who they are, and they don't, offer lengthy messages. They don't engage. They're just there, and they watch, they observe, and it seems like they just wait. And for many experiencers, that's far more unsettling than any kind of direct interaction could ever be. Now, one of the most interesting aspects of this insectoid phenomenon is how remarkably consistent the descriptions of these beings tend to be from witness to witness to witness. Even when witnesses come from different backgrounds in different countries and they're born in different decades, certain details about these insectoids appear again and again and again. And that's that they're usually described as tall, like I said, between 6 and 8 feet. They're thin, they're insect-like. Their heads resemble something like you would see on a praying mantis, complete with those large eyes that are positioned on either side of the face. And a lot of witnesses will describe them as being green or brown colored. Sometimes you'll get reports about darker shades, but regardless of those exact details, the overall impression pretty much remains consistent. And unlike a lot of other reports involving like the Greys, where physical procedures often are the main focus of the encounter, these encounters with the Mantids or the Insectoids, they frequently center around communication, or well, maybe I should say not necessarily communication. I think maybe more accurate description would be awareness, because the witnesses, they don't really describe words being spoken. They don't describe when they do have conversations with these insectoids. They don't necessarily describe them as like being held in the traditional sense, but they instead they report receiving like concepts in their mind instantaneously, ideas and knowledge and understanding. Like this information was just like somehow just beamed or transferred directly into their brains. And some experiencers claim that they were even shown images inside their head. People report having visions, and other people describe like a sudden awareness of concepts that they felt incapable of fully understanding. And that's one of the strangest recurring themes surrounding the insectoid encounters. A lot of witnesses leave with the impression that these beings possess an intelligence operating on a completely different level than what we've got as just mere humans. They're not just simply smarter, they're different. The comparison that's often made is the difference between a human being and an insect, literally. An insect, except it's in the opposite, right? So an insect, a normal insect, may perceive a human, and it may react to us humans, but it can't truly comprehend the full scope of human thought, culture, science, or experience, stuff like that. And some witnesses claim being around the insectoids feel like they're occupying that lower position of the insects, like they were briefly standing in the presence of something operating on a level that they couldn't really grasp. And for a lot of people, that realization proved to be the most deeply unsettling thing of the whole experience. Now, one of the most fascinating aspects of the insectoid phenomenon is that witnesses rarely spend that much time talking about the being's appearance once they've had time to reflect on the encounter as a whole. And what I mean by that is that, well, okay, so the image of a 7-foot tall praying mantis is got to be a memorable image, right? But when experiencers discuss the events weeks, months, years later, they will a lot of times focus on something else entirely than just the overall appearance. They talk about the intelligence. Again and again, people who claim to have encountered these insectoids describe the same overwhelming impression. Not simply intelligence the way that we as humans normally think about it, not the intelligence of a scientist or a professor or even a genius level human. They describe the sensation of being in a presence of a mind operating on a completely different level. A lot of people struggle to find the words for what this is. And a lot of people will describe these insectoids as they get the overwhelming impression, this feeling that they're an ancient race, they're ancient beings. And a lot of people will also say that they seem just so advanced that we can't comprehend it. And there's even been a few reports that compare the experience to standing on the edge of the ocean and suddenly realizing how vast it truly is. The feeling isn't necessarily fear, but fear is present a lot in these encounters. And the main overall feeling that people describe is like awe. They're just in total awe of these insectoid beings. An awareness that whatever is standing before you understands far more than you do. That kind of feeling. And what's really interesting to me is how different this is from reports involving the Greys and the Nordics. Witnesses experiencing or encountering the insectoids they'll describe a lot of times the Greys as efficient and task-oriented, whatever they're doing, they appear to be focused on the task and completing it. And by contrast, the Nordics, they're frequently portrayed like communicators. That's kind of what we learned in these last 2 episodes. And the encounters with the Nordics often will involve messages, warnings. They're trying to teach us stuff, or they're having discussions with the experiencers about the fate of humanity. But the Insectoids, well, they occupy a different category completely. And a lot of people who encounter the Insectoids describe them as neither workers nor teachers, but instead they seem to function more on a level of like a supervisor or someone who is in charge and is observing. There's like they're decision makers, planners, beings who are aware of the larger picture while everyone else is focused on the details. Now, this impression appears frequently, and it's, as a matter of fact, it appears frequently enough that it eventually caught the attention of UFO researchers, and that's where the story gets to be particularly interesting, because once the UFO investigation community started comparing reports from different witnesses, they found a pretty curious pattern. The Insectoids weren't just appearing randomly. They seemed to occupy a very specific place within the larger mythology of the UFO phenomenon. And when we come back after this break, we're going to take a look and hopefully find out what that is. So I'll be back in about 60 seconds.
Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel, maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
Hey guys, I'd love to hear from you. Do you have a story, a question, or a topic you'd like me to cover? If so, you can reach me directly by email at sandman@parareality.com. Or, for a more personal touch, you can just call the Secret Bunker at 615-461-5001 and leave a message. Just know that by calling, you're giving me permission to feature your voice on the podcast. Again, that number to call is 615-461-5001. You want to stay up to date with all things Parareality? Then follow me on all major social media platforms. You can find me on Facebook at sandman.parareality, or you can follow me on X, Instagram, Blue Sky, and TikTok by looking for my handle at ParaRealRadio. You can also subscribe to my YouTube channel by looking for Parareality 1. That's Parareality with the number 1 behind it. And don't forget to visit my website, parareality.com. That's where you'll find an archive of all of my past podcast episodes for free. You can also find the latest in paranormal news from all around the world under the Para News section. Your support means everything, whether you buy something from my store or leave me a positive review on whatever podcast app you're listening on. A 3-star or higher review goes a long way in helping this podcast reach new listeners, and I would truly appreciate it. Thank you. Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. It's okay, so it's more like 2 minutes than 1 minute, but you kind of get the idea. So if you've been enjoying the topics that we explore here on the Parareality Podcast, then why not take the journey even further with my books? 50 Cryptids in 50 States, a field guide to America's most mysterious creatures. It's your guide to the legendary creatures from across America, exploring their history, eyewitness accounts, and the evidence behind the legends. And Palo Santo and Sage, Sacred Smoke and Spiritual Cleansing for the Beginner, is a practical guide to the traditions and spiritual uses of cleansing herbs like sage and Palo Santo. In the title, there's even a section, or a complete chapter, should I say, that's devoted to you people who are paranormal investigators, which I think you will find to be very useful. Both of these books are available right now on Amazon, coming soon on Kindle version, I hope. But you can also order signed copies if you'd like directly from my website at parareality.com. So both books, once again, available on Amazon.com. 50 Cryptids in 50 States, a field guide to America's most mysterious creatures, and Palo Santo and Sage, Sacred Smoke and Spiritual Cleansing for the Beginner. Both available on Amazon right now. Find them also on my website. You can order signed copies if you want, parareality.com. Thank you for your support and hopefully happy reading. Now let's get back into it, everybody. So when I left, was talking about how the Mantids, or the Insectoids, weren't just appearing, or they didn't seem to be appearing randomly, that once the UFO researchers started comparing notes, that the Insectoids seemed to be occupying a specific place within the larger mythology of the UFO phenomenon. So as reports involving these insect-like beings began appearing more frequently in abduction literature, the researchers found themselves confronted with this really unusual problem. The descriptions were strange. They were really strange, but despite their unusual nature, a lot of witnesses appeared to be describing remarkably similar entities. And one of the first researchers to encounter these reports was Budd Hopkins, and he's best remembered for his pioneering work on alien abduction cases and for helping bring the subject to the public spotlight during the 1980s and 1990s. Now, a lot of his work focused on encounters with the Greys and hybridization type theories, but within the larger body of reports he collected were occasional references to other beings, entities that seemed to occupy positions of authority during these abduction experiences. And then came Harvard psychiatrist John Mack. And unlike a lot of other researchers, Mack was less interested in proving extraterrestrial visitation than he was in understanding the experiences themselves. And after he interviewed countless number of experiencers, he came to the conclusion that people are reporting these encounters were generally sincere. Whether these encounters were literally extraterrestrial, whether they were just psychological or spiritual or just something else entirely, Mack believed the experiences were profoundly real to those who lived through them. Now, among the many reports that he examined were accounts involving insect-like intelligences. Now, once again, witnesses frequently describe the same things: telepathic communication, overwhelming intelligence, and the sense that these beings occupied some sort of unique position within this encounter. And maybe no researcher came more closely associated with this aspect of the phenomenon than David Jacobs. Now, Jacobs spent decades interviewing alleged abductees and conducting hypnotic regression sessions, and over time, he began noticing recurring patterns within these reports. Witnesses frequently describe different types of entities appearing during the same encounter. Greys were common, human-looking beings appeared less frequently, and occasionally witnesses described insect-like entities that seemed to occupy some sort of position of authority. And to Jacobs, this pattern suggested a structure. It suggested organization, purpose. The Mantids, or the Insectoids, weren't simply just another type of alien. They were supervising these encounters, or at least that's what he theorized. And that conclusion would eventually place David Jacobs at the center of one of the most significant debates in modern UFO research. Now, before we get into the David Jacobs debate, I want to say that Budd Hopkins, John Mack, and David Jacobs included, all three of them are controversial figures within ufology. And whether you agree with them or not, and I'm not necessarily one that is a big proponent of hypnotic regression. I think that there's too many variables that can be interjected into that, and I'm not going to get into it. But regardless of how you feel about John Mack, David Jacobs, or Budd Hopkins, they hold a place within ufology and UFO lore, and you can't just discount their contributions, no matter how controversial they may be. So I'm not advocating that any of these guys are correct or incorrect with their theories. I'm just saying we can't discount them, and you shouldn't, because they are important. Now, getting back to the David Jacobs debate. Now, whenever David Jacobs' work is talked about, it's important to recognize that strong opinions exist on both sides of this conversation, okay? So supporters of David Jacobs, well, they view this guy as one of the most important alien abduction researchers of the modern era. They'll be pointing out things that, like, he spent decades collecting testimony from hundreds of experiencers, and he documented recurring themes across multiple cases and stuff like that. And to these people, to his supporters, the consistency of these reports is difficult to ignore. And I'll have to admit, consistency goes a long way. A lot of his supporters will also say that the witnesses he interviewed often described these insectoids independently of one another. They didn't know each other. They'd never met. They were in different areas of the country or the world. Some were unfamiliar with UFOs and UFO literature and UFO lore, and others had never heard of these insectoid, these insect-like beings before they had their encounters and reported them. But similarities continued to emerge. There was the same descriptions, the same sense of this hierarchy, the same impression that the insectoids occupied supervisory type roles. And to Jacobs and a lot of his supporters, these recurring themes suggested that something objective might be taking place. His critics, however, they view the situation very differently. The critics' concerns center mainly around the hypnotic regression. Now, briefly, what is that? Well, it's a technique that's frequently used in abduction research. Now, while hypnosis can be useful in certain therapeutic settings, there's a lot of psychologists out there who caution that it can also influence memory in unexpected ways. See, modern memory research has demonstrated that human memory isn't a perfect recording of events. And I don't think you have to, be a super genius to figure that out. Instead, memory is reconstructive. Every time we recall an event, we're effectively rebuilding it from stored information in our brain. And that process leaves a lot of room for error. And it also leaves a lot of room for suggestion. So his detractors will say that people under hypnosis may unintentionally incorporate expectations, assumptions, or external type influences into their recollections. And in some cases, leading questions can shape the way memories are reconstructed. Even subtle cues from an interviewer can influence what emerges during a session. Now, most importantly, I have to say a lot of critics they're not suggesting that the experiencers are lying. In fact, many psychologists believe just the opposite. People can sincerely report these experiences that they feel absolutely were real while still being mistaken about their origin. Now, from this perspective, recurring themes involving insectoids may reflect cultural influences, expectations, or shared narratives rather than actual encounters with non-human entities. Now, I will have to, once again, not saying that I support or don't support either one of these theories, but I'll have to say this makes sense to me as well. Okay. But, there are going to be those who are going to push back against this argument, especially those who support Jacobs and his work. Now, they're going to say, well, hypnosis has limitations, but let me point out that similarities appear even in cases where hypnosis wasn't used. So how do you explain that? They're going to say that the consistency of certain reports deserves further investigation rather than immediate, just outright dismissal. And so the debate about this will rage on. It continues. And decades later, there's still no general consensus about this whole thing. There's no definitive proof, no universally accepted explanation. There's only a growing collection of reports and interpretations and a bunch of unanswered questions. But regardless of where you stand on the Jacobs debate, there's one thing that is clear as far as I'm concerned, and that is his work helped popularize an idea that will become central to modern insectoid lore, and that's the overseer theory. Now remember, whether agree with him or not, agree with Budd Hopkins or not, agree with John Mack or not, they hold a place in UFO lore, and their work is important. So what is the overseer theory? Let's talk a little bit about it. Well, as researchers continue collecting reports involving insectoids, one particular pattern became increasingly difficult to ignore. And that's this: the insectoids rarely seem to appear by themselves. If all we had were stories that involved giant insect-like beings, the phenomenon, it'd still be strange, don't get me wrong, but it'd be relatively straightforward, right? Witnesses would report unusual encounters, researchers would compare notes, and this mystery would continue as much as it always has. But that's not what a lot of people describe. A lot of these experiencers, they don't describe it like that. Again and again, over and over, reports emerge involving multiple types of entities appearing during the same encounter. Witnesses who describe the Greys often report seeing insectoids as well. Others claim to have encountered Nordics alongside both the Greys and the insectoids, and in some cases, all three appear within a single experience. Now, naturally, this is going to raise some questions. I know it does for me. So if these reports are accurate, why would such dramatically different beings be appearing together? Because they're not all from the same, or you would think they're not all from the same place, right? So what are they all three doing together? Why do witnesses consistently describe them as behaving differently? And maybe most importantly is, why do so many experiencers walk away with the impression that the insectoids occupy this special role within this abduction encounter? Now, over time, these questions gave rise to what has become known as the overseer theory. So, according to this theory, the various entities reported within UFO encounters may represent different roles within a larger system. The Greys are often described as carrying out specific tasks. They're the ones most commonly associated with examinations and procedures and direct interaction with the abductees. And the Nordics occupy a different role. Witnesses often say that the Nordics are communicators, guides, teachers. They're the ones who explain things, answer questions, and provide us with reassurance during the encounters. But the Mantids, or the Insectoids, they're different. Many experiencers, or should I say abductees, describe them as standing apart from the activity that's going on around them. They aren't conducting procedures. They aren't delivering lengthy messages. They're not trying to teach us anything, but instead they just appear to be observing everything that's going on. And some witnesses report the feeling that the insectoids already know exactly what's happening and have no need to directly participate in it. And what's really interesting is that a lot of people arrive at this conclusion without being told what the other abductees have reported. They simply describe a feeling that the insectoid possessed a level of authority that everyone else seemed to recognize. Now, from a skeptical perspective, you could argue that human beings naturally create hierarchies when attempting to make sense out of confusing experiences. And, we assign roles, we identify leaders, we construct narratives that help us understand what's going on, what we're witnessing, and that's a perfectly reasonable explanation, but it doesn't change the fact that the pattern continues to appear in these experiences. Whether the overseer theory reflects an actual structure within this whole phenomena or simply the way human beings interpret extraordinary experiences remains unknown. Yet the presence, or the persistence, should I say, of the idea has made it one of the most influential theories surrounding insectoid encounters. And if nothing else, it reveals how dramatically the UFO mystery has evolved. What begins as a sighting of an unusual object in the sky gradually transforms into a story involving multiple intelligences, complex relationships, and questions that extend far beyond the traditional extraterrestrial hypothesis. In fact, once we start talking about the insectoids as being supervisors or overseers, we're not just talking about just aliens anymore. We're talking about archetypes now. We're bringing in symbolism. We're bringing in ideas that seem to resonate on a deeper psychological level. And that's where another fascinating layer of the mystery begins to emerge. And one of the most intriguing aspects of the mantid phenomenon is that it often feels to the experiencers weirdly familiar. Not because people regularly encounter 7-foot-tall insect-like beings, but most of us would be quite happy if that never happened, I think. But it's because insects have occupied a unique and powerful place within human culture for thousands of years. Now, long before anybody ever started talking about UFOs, extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, stuff like that, insects appeared in myths and religious traditions, folklore, and symbolic systems throughout the world. They were often associated with things like transformation, wisdom, death, rebirth, and the mysterious forces that govern our everyday human life. So consider the ancient Egyptians. Now, they didn't worship praying mantises specifically, but insects played an important role in their spiritual symbolism. Take, for example, the scarab beetle. It became one of the most recognizable symbols in Egyptian culture. It represents rebirth, renewal, and the eternal cycle of existence. And elsewhere, the praying mantis developed its own reputation. In some African traditions, the mantis was regarded as a sacred messenger. Certain cultures viewed it like it was a symbol of patience, a symbol of awareness and heightened perception. Its unusual appearance and its deliberate movements gave it an almost supernatural quality. And even today, people tend to react differently to mantises than they do other insects. So just watch a praying mantis for a few minutes, and it's easy to understand why. Because unlike a lot of other insects, it often appears to be studying its surroundings. Its posture seems deliberate, and its movements seem like they're calculated. The large eyes and distinctive stance create the impression of intelligence. Whether that impression is accurate or not, that's what it creates. And maybe that's one reason why Insectoids resonate so strongly within the UFO lore, because it combines two powerful human responsive, curiosity and uneasiness. And we recognize something intelligent, but we don't recognize ourselves. Now, psychologists have a long time, they have observed that human beings react strongly to things that are almost familiar while remaining fundamentally different. A face that appears human but's not quite human. A voice that sounds natural but somehow feels wrong. A movement that resembles human behavior while remaining distinctly alien. This discomfort is a lot of times associated with what researchers call the uncanny valley. The insectoids seemed like they're almost perfectly designed to trigger that response. They appear aware, they appear purposeful, they appear intelligent, but yet they remain profoundly alien. And maybe that's why reports involving insectoids tend to linger in people's minds. They force the witnesses to confront an intelligence that feels real and recognizable while remaining completely outside ordinary human experience. Now, of course, symbolism and psychology can only take us so far, right? Because a lot of researchers suggested that the insectoids may represent something even stranger than extraterrestrial beings. So what if they're not coming from another planet at all? What if the answer lies somewhere beyond their traditional extraterrestrial framework? For much of the 20th century, the dominant explanation for UFO encounters was relatively simple. Advanced civilizations from a distant star system were visiting Earth. Plain and simple, done, right? It's a compelling idea, and for a lot of people, it remains the most logical explanation. After all, if intelligent life exists elsewhere in the universe, it's reasonable to assume that some civilizations might actually develop technology that's capable of crossing the vast distances between the galaxies, between stars, between solar systems. But as researchers accumulated more reports, certain aspects of the insectoid phenomenon became increasingly difficult to fit into just a purely extraterrestrial model. Objects appeared and disappeared without obvious explanations. Encounters occurred during altered states of consciousness. Witnesses reported telepathic communication rather than spoken language, and experiences often felt simultaneously physical and non-physical. And the more investigators studied these cases, the more some investigators began to suspect that something else might be happening here. This is where researchers like Jacques Vallée enter the conversation. Now, Vallée has, for the longest time, argued that the phenomena may not be extraterrestrial in the conventional sense. So rather than visitors coming here from a distant planet, he says that humanity may be interacting with an intelligence that has always been present throughout history, appearing to us in forms that reflect the beliefs and expectations of a particular culture. In one era, it might have been angels, in another fairies, in a different one spirits, and today maybe we're reporting aliens. Now, whether Vallée is correct remains a matter of highly contested debate, but his ideas resonate strongly with many of the aspects of the insectoid phenomena. Witnesses frequently will describe encounters that feel less like physical meetings and more like experiences involving consciousness itself. Remember, I've said this before, communication occurs without words, like telepathically. Information seems to just arrive in the person's mind instantaneously. And those who are having this experience often feel more, say it feels more real than ordinary reality, even when the witnesses struggle to explain exactly what happened. And many insectoid encounters seem to exist at the intersection of the physical and the psychological. They blur that boundary between objective experience and subjective perception in ways that continue to frustrate researchers. And this has led to some investigators suggesting that the insectoids may fit more comfortably within like an interdimensional explanation than a traditional extraterrestrial one. Now, that idea raises an entirely new set of questions, like what exactly is an interdimensional intelligence? How would such a being interact with humanity? And why would it appear as an insect-like entity? And maybe most importantly is, why would so many witnesses report similar experiences? Nobody has definitive answers, but that's often the nature of the UFO phenomena, isn't it? Every time we think we found an explanation, the mystery gets bigger. And by this point in our journey, we've moved far beyond the simple question of whether aliens exist. We're now confronting questions about consciousness, perception, reality itself, and humanity's place within a universe that may be far stranger than we can currently comprehend. Which brings us to the final question of this entire summer series. And that's this: if the Greys, Nordics, and Insectoids all occupy the same mystery, where exactly do they fit? And what does that tell us about the phenomena as a whole? So, by this point in our journey, we've traveled a long way from the simple question of whether UFOs are real or not. Over the course of this summer series, we've explored 3 of the most commonly reported entities associated with the phenomenon: the Greys, the Nordics, and the Insectoids. And each seem to occupy their own unique place within UFO lore. Their appearances differ dramatically, their reported behaviors differ dramatically, even their emotional responses that are evoked within the witnesses tend to be really different. The Greys are often associated with like uncertainty. Their encounters frequently involve things like examinations, missing time, and questions that seem to have no clear answer. The Nordics, on the other hand, occupy almost the opposite end of the spectrum. Their stories often revolve around communication and guidance and the possibility that humanity may be part of something larger than itself. And then here come the Insectoids. Meanwhile, these Insectoids, they introduce an entirely different dimension to this mystery. Rather than appearing as workers or teachers, they're often portrayed as observers, beings that possess an intelligence so vast that witnesses struggle to describe it. Yet, despite all these differences, one fact continues to stand out. These entities frequently appear within the same stories. Over and over again, experiencers describe encounters involving multiple types of beings. Sometimes the Greys are present, sometimes the Nordics, sometimes the Insectoids, and occasionally witnesses report all three of them. And that raises a really fascinating possibility. What if these aren't separate mysteries at all? What if they're different aspects of the same phenomenon? Now, I want to be clear. There's no evidence proving this connection exists. This remains strictly within the realm of speculation here, but it's a question that naturally emerges when you begin comparing reports across decades of UFO research. Some researchers believe the various entities may represent different groups with different agendas. Others argue they may be manifestations of a single intelligence appearing in forms that us humans can't comprehend. And other people suggest that the phenomenon itself may be psychological, symbolic, or even spiritual, rather than just simply extraterrestrial. And that's really where we find ourselves after decades of investigation. Not at a conclusion, not at an answer, but with another question. And the deeper we explore the UFO phenomenon, the more complicated it becomes. Every answer seems to reveal another layer. Every explanation creates new mysteries. And maybe that's why the subject continues to fascinate so many people. Because despite all the books, all the documentaries, all the eyewitness reports, and all the investigations, we're still left confronting the same fundamental mystery that has followed humanity for generations. Are we alone? Or are we sharing reality with something we don't yet understand? I'll be back to close it down right after this.
Chronic migraine, 15 or more headache days a month, each lasting 4 hours or more, can make me feel like a spectator in my own life.
Botox, onabotulinum toxin A, prevents headaches in adults with chronic migraine. It's not for those with 14 or fewer headache days a month. It's the #1 prescribed branded chronic migraine preventive treatment.
Prescription Botox is injected by your doctor. Effects of Botox may spread hours to weeks after injection, causing serious symptoms. Alert your doctor right away, as difficulty swallowing, speaking, breathing, eye problems, or muscle weakness can be signs of a life-threatening condition. Patients with these conditions before injection are at highest risk. Side effects may include allergic reactions, neck and injection site pain, fatigue, and headache. Allergic reactions can include rash, welts, asthma symptoms, and dizziness. Don't receive Botox if there's a skin infection. Tell your doctor your medical history, muscle or nerve conditions, including ALS, Lou Gehrig's disease, myasthenia gravis, or Lambert-Eaton syndrome, and medications, including botulinum toxins, as these may increase the risk of serious side effects.
Why wait? Ask your doctor, visit BotoxChronicMigraine.com, or call 1-800-44-BOTOX to learn more.
Tomorrow morning is knocking. Stock your fridge now. How about a creamy mocha frappuccino drink? Or a sweet vanilla? Smooth caramel, maybe? Or a white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Find Starbucks Frappuccino drinks wherever you buy your groceries.
You've listened to the stories. You've questioned the truth. Now it's time to wear it. Head over to parareality.com and check out the official Parareality merchandise shop. T-shirts featuring the official podcast logo, the iconic Parareality all-seeing eye, plus mugs, hats, totes, pillows, stickers, and yes, even something for your pooch. But while you're there, don't stop at the merch. Look a little closer. Dig a little deeper. Somewhere on the site, you'll find the entrance to the secret bunker, the members-only section of parareality.com. Inside the Parareality Top Secret Files. Real FBI documents on UFOs, aliens, Bigfoot, Adolf Hitler, and more. Plus classified audio. Some of the strangest messages ever left on the secret bunker hotline, and access to a secret podcast side project that's never been released publicly. And here's the best part. It's all absolutely free. Once you're in, don't forget to claim your free Parareality Podcast Secret Bunker t-shirt. Just make sure you place your order. The truth is out there. The bunker is waiting. Visit parareality.com and find what you weren't supposed to.
Welcome back to the podcast, everybody. You know, as we begin to wind this thing down, we've taken a lot of long looks at the Greys and the Nordics and the Mantids, and I've hoped that you have gotten something out of this. I know I've learned some things that I didn't know as I was doing research for this, so I hope that you have too. And as we bring this summer series to a close, it's worth taking a moment to reflect on just how far this journey has taken us. We began with the Greys, maybe the most recognizable figures in all of UFO lore. Through stories of abductions and missing time and unexplained encounters, they introduced us to a mystery that continues to challenge our understanding of reality, whether they represent extraterrestrials, interdimensional entities, psychological archetypes, or something else entirely remains an open question. And from there, we turned our attention to the Nordics. Their stories offered a very different perspective on the phenomena. And instead of examinations and uncertainty, witnesses described guidance, communication, and messages concerning humanity's future. The Nordics introduced the possibility that the mystery might not simply be about observation, but about meaning. And then tonight, we explored the Insectoids. Of the three, the Insectoids may be the most difficult to understand. Witnesses frequently describe them as possessing extraordinary intelligence, operating behind the scenes, and occupying a role that seems fundamentally different from both the Greys and the Nordics. Now, whether those reports represent genuine encounters, symbolic experiences, or something entirely beyond our current understanding, well, that remains impossible for us to know. But what's fascinating is that each of these beings appear to represent a different face of the same mystery. The Greys challenge us to ask what might be happening. The Nordics challenge us to ask why it might be happening. And the Insectoids challenge us to ask who or what might be behind it all. And maybe that's the real lesson of the UFO phenomenon. Not that it provides answers, but that it continually forces us to ask better questions. Because every time we think we've reached the end of this mystery, we discovered that there's another horizon waiting beyond it. Whether these beings are extraterrestrials, interdimensional intelligences, manifestations of our consciousness, psychological constructs, or something we haven't even imagined yet, one thing remains certain. And that's the phenomenon refuses to fit neatly into any one single explanation. And maybe that's exactly why it continues to captivate us. Because at its heart, the UFO mystery isn't about aliens. It's about the limits of human understanding. It's about the possibility that reality may be far stranger than we realize. And it's about the enduring desire to understand our place within a universe that still holds countless secrets. Thank you for joining me on this summer series journey through the Greys, the Nordics, and the Insectoids. Until next time, keep questioning, keep searching, and keep your eyes on the skies. You know, I hope that you enjoyed tonight's episode of Parareality. I hope that you enjoyed the whole entire summer series, what I'm talking about, especially tonight's episode. Of course, we'll have our next episode is going to drop next week at 8 o'clock p.m. Central U.S. time. So make sure you tune in, and find out. Everybody, I hope that this podcast opened up your mind to new ways of thinking, expands your consciousness, and produces a change in the way you see the world. If you wish to change, you must lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe. I hope that you have a wonderful evening, a great weekend, and I'll see you again next week. Good night, everybody.
If you wish to change, you must first lift the veil of ignorance that has been cast over your eyes. Only then will you see the true power of the universe.
The right window treatments change everything: your sleep, your privacy, the way every room looks and feels. At Blinds.com, we've spent 30 years making it surprisingly simple to get exactly what your home needs. We've covered over 25 million windows and have 50,000 5-star reviews to prove we deliver. Whether you DIY it or want a pro to handle everything from measure to install, we have you covered. Real design professionals, free samples, zero pressure. Right now, get up to 45% off site-wide, plus get a free professional measure at Blinds.com. Rules and restrictions apply.